This person says, I've been trying to understand the different styles of painting, but I just can't understand what color field painting is all about. Please do a quick tip that explains color field painting. Well, this one might surprise you. Well, color field painting is you might say, a tiny segment or a type of painting that evolved as a result of abstract painting. I'd like to take you through a little journey now to sort of show you a quick and dirty journey through history of how abstract painting became color field painting, or how the color field painting idea came. So to begin with, in history, artists were concerned with images. There came a time in history where artists got more concerned with not just the images, but the elements of painting that create the image. So something like this little study of hens that I have here might have initially, when abstract painting first began, something like that might have been of interest to artists to explore, not according to what the image is, but to how those colors are placed on the image. So the hens themselves might have become more studies in color according to where those colors would have been placed in that field. This is the early thinking. And now remember, I'm oversimplifying. I'm way oversimplifying. But I'm trying to illustrate for you here how the whole thing evolved, because abstract painting itself is difficult for a lot of people to understand. A lot of people say, why would you want to do that? Anybody can do that. And we know that even along the way, there have been paintings that were done by monkeys that were abstract and would sell for a lot of money, and a big deal would be made of it. You see what I'm doing here? I'm really just abstracting underneath. I'm abstracting, and I hope you're not having a stroke while I'm doing this, but I'm just abstracting these images now into bits of color that are placed pretty much where they would be placed in the image, but the image is losing importance and the color is all that is important. So it is a matter of adjusting or responding to just color and what color is doing in the image itself, rather than what the images are doing. So even that green in the background might not be presented in an abstract painting. It might not be presented as grass, where you would recognize grass, but as colors that are in the grass itself, and where those colors might be appearing in a particular scene. Now, remember, I want to keep emphasizing that I am oversimplifying. I'm way oversimplifying abstract painting. But the original, or the early works that began to be abstracted, were beginning to look more like what I'm doing right here than what we would recognize as being an image of hens hens in a pasture, or so to speak. So the greens would be represented early on. The greens would be represented very close to what greens or to the greens that would appear, but it would not be the grass that would be important, but the color of the grass. So now I have pretty much fully abstracted what you saw initially as being a relatively realistic interpretation of those hens. So the abstract painting would have begun that way. And then along in history, the image of the hens, or images of anything, became unimportant. There reached a time in abstract painting where the abstract itself was no longer referring to any images, but the elements themselves: color, value, texture, direction, line, shape. The elements themselves are what became the subject of abstract painting. So something like these hens then in abstract painting would have begun to look something like maybe this, where we no longer see hens. We no longer even perceive that any hens might be there, but we are simply looking at shapes and colors and how shapes and colors might relate to each other as just abstracted elements working together, where the colors are still important, where the colors are placed are important, but the total painting is not about images, but about color or shapes. In some cases, the abstract paintings would be totally about shapes. In some cases, the abstract painting would be totally about color. Some cases, totally about texture. And in some cases, things like rhythm. If you remember Jackson Pollock, his paintings were totally concerned with the rhythm only. He did those little drips of paint that famously have been described as his dance around with the dropping of the color, and the fact that it was the way he was moving that was determining where the color went. So we found all kinds of abstraction. And remember, again, I am oversimplifying, but now we have an image that is not representative of hens. If you didn't know there were hens there, you would look at that and say, what? Some people who are looking for images would say, what is it? Other people who are more inclined towards the abstract works would say, looking at it, they would look at how the colors are working against each other and where they're placed and the shapes they're creating and that sort of thing. Now, as artists themselves are involved in these various movements, and they began to think about where that could evolve to, where those ideas could evolve to, and they began to go in different directions. One direction they went into was minimalism, and that simply meant, in essence, a very simplified version, how little can we do and have the painting to work as a painting. And I'm sure you've probably seen images of nothing in the world except a canvas that is painted a single color. That was totally minimal, had nothing on it but the color, one element. The color, not only one element, but one element of one particular color. The color field painters were concerned only with color, but the values of the color were no longer important. And some of them, the pure color field painters, the textures that were found in the colors were no longer important, but the color stood for something itself. Now, one of the main color field painters is Mark Rothko. You can look these up. There's lots of information about the color field paintings on the internet. But Mark Rothko, and for Mark Rothko, each color was sort of representative of a human emotion, and he sort of layered those colors. So we'll find here things of painting like this. You will find the colors are all very similar to each other in hue or in how they are related on the color wheel. So you see the color wheel here. If I put it right here, you can see all of his colors are in this range right in here. So you might call those analogous colors. And so they had this relationship to each other with a little bit of an emphasis of that relationship with these little bits of blue, which is, you see over on the other side, the complement of that color. But that was more to use color to express or to stimulate emotion of some sort. So Mark Rothko was one of the main ones that was doing the color field painting. But we had others who were doing color field painting too. Barnett Newman was more intellectual. For him, color was a way of defining space or creating space on the canvas. And he had a lot of his paintings, we'll see, they have these famous lines in them. You see a little bit of variation in the green there, more of the blue greens down here, and a little bit more, less blue here. And I have seen that painting hung or demonstrated, hung the other direction, sideways. So you might see them vertical or you might see them horizontal. We see these two lines here. You see this line is done in a color that makes a clearer division because it's a complementary color. He called these zip lines, by the way. You see this is the color yellow, which is a brighter color. It's a way of defining space. Now you can look all this up if you want to. And then another one of the color field painters was Clifford Steele. For him, color represented human emotion, or maybe humanity versus nature and that sort of thing. So we see he would often use these really contrasting colors, and his shapes would often be very ragged or intense type shapes with edges such as this. But by the field, we mean the whole area of the canvas is fields of color. So if I were going to turn this painting into a color field painting, then it might look something like what I'm about to do now. I might completely obliterate the divisions as I have them here. I might want the whole field to be more in the orange range, and it depends on if I were a color field painting, it would depend on what I'm trying to think of, or what I'm thinking or perceiving of colors being. Now, I'm giving you, as I said before, a very simplistic explanation, but it's about color as a language. What color does or can do in a painting as a language by itself. So if I'm speaking the language of orange or orange to yellow-orange, and I might want to say that, no, let me say something else, that also the thinking of how a color worked was often influenced by whatever philosophical or religious thinking might have been prevalent in the day. And so something like this, if I'm thinking of color in a particular context, such as maybe human conflict or something like that, then I would have an entire field of a single color, and I'd have that field interrupted by another color, which is exactly what I'm doing here. And so color field painting has to do with a field, a large area of the canvas that goes from side to side and top to bottom, covers the entire canvas. And by the way, you rarely see these things framed. They weren't painted to be framed, but you would see that covered, that a single color pretty much moving from one side to the other. Now some of them, they have different variations, but this is, as I said before, a very simplistic version to sort of help you understand what we mean by color field painting. And so in this case, you see, now I have totally transformed my roosters, or my hens, or whatever they are, my chickens, into what I could call a color field painting, where the colors of red and red-orange and red-orange to orange are maybe speaking as color speaking color against those little splotches of green. And if I had in my mind color as some sort of a symbol for something else, I would be using it to interpret that. So if I were interpreting human conflict with a little bit of hope at the end of the tunnel, and if green were to be my color of hope, Well, I am oversimplifying, and so please understand that part of it. But I'm trying to move that process along for you to show you that in the period of painting, as painters were exploring many possibilities beyond using painting to express images, then this is the way the color field, or a very simple version of how color field painting evolved. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.